Hi, Nancy Ann Martin here with Recipes for a Better Body, and today I'm going to show you how to make a healthier pie crust with oat flour and coconut oil. The only ingredients we're going to need today are 2 cups of oat flour, 2/3 cup of coconut oil, and I have mine chilled, about 1/4 teaspoon of salt or to taste, and some ice water. Okay, so we're going to start out now with the 2 cups of oat flour in my food processor. Now, a couple things I want to tell you. First of all, I buy my oat flour ready-made. It's less expensive, honestly, than grinding up oats. But if you need some oat flour, you don't have any on hand, or if you run out forever, you can just take regular old-fashioned oats, put them in a blender or a food processor, blend them up until they're powder, and you've got oat flour. This way it's a little bit softer, a little bit finer milled, but that works perfectly fine as a substitution. Okay, let's go on with our recipe. Now I'm putting my oat flour and my ingredients, I'm going to mix it in the food processor. I found this turns out a really nice pie crust and it's much faster. And for today's video I want to move quick. However, you can mix these in a bowl also, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute, so let's just keep that in mind. I'm unplugged, I don't want to hurt myself, and I've got my 2 cups of oat flour in the food processor, and I'm doing about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I tend to like my crust a little saltier than most people, so put a pinch or 2 in there, mix it up, then taste it if you want to, and see if it's salted to your satisfaction. I'll pop this off. And just a quick mix to get the salt mixed in. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm unplugging again, is I'm going to take my chilled coconut oil. Now normally in a pie crust recipe, you are going to use white flour and shortening, but shortening, as we all know, is loaded in trans fats and really bad for you. So while this is not a low fat recipe, it is a much healthier fat than you will get in most other kinds of pie crust, healthier store-bought or otherwise. So that all came off in a big chunk. I'm using 2/3 cup. The rule when you're making pie crust, at least my rule, is 1 part of fat to 2 to 3 parts of flour. I'm going to put this in here. And I'm going to process it very quickly. Now you'll see how fast this goes in the food processor, but I'll tell you how to do it by hand in a minute. Okay, so here's what our finished coconut oil in the flour looks like when it's all cut in. Looks kind of mealy. I'm being careful. There's blades in there. If you don't have a food processor, you can just mix your flour and your salt in a regular bowl, and then when you add your coconut oil, you can either use 2 knives to cut it in, which is what I would recommend, and then when the pieces get too small to break them down any farther with the 2 knives, you can smash it in more with a fork, and that's perfectly acceptable as well, although it does take a little bit longer. So now that we have our coconut oil all mixed into our oat flour and salt, it's time to add water. Now I've got ice water. One of the tricks to turn out a great pie crust is to have really cold ingredients. So like I said, I had chilled my coconut oil, and now I have really cold water, and I'm just going to put a little bit in. We just want enough to basically hold this together. Over mixing can turn out a tough pie crust, and that's a rule that applies regardless of what kind of pie crust you're making. So I'm going to put a little water in there. I know I'll need at least that much. And now I'm just going to process it by pulsing. Now if you're doing this by hand, just toss it with a fork until they hold together. As you can see, this is what it looks like after my first water addition. It's not, whoops, that was my oven heating. It's not quite where I want it as far as being able to hold together. So I'm going to add some more water. A little ice fell in, that's okay, the processor will get it. And I'm going to pulse it again until it's thoroughly combined. And here we go. See how that's holding together? I'm going to stop right there. Now we have our water and oat flour and coconut oil all together, and it is time to combine them. So I'm going to take these blades out, and I'm going to smash this all together a little bit. I'm going to put it on my, that's my ice. Click it in there. a piece of wax paper. I learned this trick in a movie I saw. I was like, why didn't I ever think of that before? It just kind of helps with transferring the dough to the pie pan. So now I'm just going to roll it out. It's shifting on me. It's the runaway. You want to try and get this as round as possible and roll it out fairly thin. I'm probably going to have some left over, but that's okay. I can make pie crust cookies with it. Now it's time to put it in our pie pan. It's not greased or anything. I'm just going to pick this up, flip the pie plate over top. A big flip. This is why I'm wearing an apron. Pull this off. Now it's going to fall apart a little bit. That's normal. It's okay. That's why I still have some cold water here, because this is going to act like glue. And I'm just going to push this down in my pie plate, and if it doesn't want to stick to itself, when I mend it, I'll just use some cold water, but it seems to be holding together really well. Now, tear off the extra, and I just take this and go around and kind of twist. So I'm going to take this and just kind of form a ridge with my fingers as I go, and in places where it's thin, I'll add some of this that I'm tearing off. I think I'll go around and just kind of get this. I like a fairly thick ridge on my pie crust. So I just play with this with my fingers. Not too much. You don't want a tough pie crust, but you do want it to look fairly nice. I always tell my family an imperfect pie crust is the sign that it's homemade. This is a single crust. If I was to do a double crust pie, I would have used 3 cups of flour to 1 cup of shortening. And the water is never measured. Depending on the conditions in your kitchen, how dry the air is, the time of year, things like that, it really can affect how much water it takes to get your crust to combine. So I just start with a fairly large amount of water. It's just water. And so there we go. Quiche is one of those recipes that I like to pre-bake my crust a little bit. So I'm just going to put this in a hot 425-degree oven, let it bake for 5 minutes, and then I'll fill it with my ingredients. For this recipe and other healthy recipes, please go to my Facebook page, Recipes for a Better Body. You can hang out for just a minute and check out the links after this. Also, if you would make a comment below and like this, I would so much appreciate it. Thanks a bunch, and you have a great day. Okay. This pie crust, and I can't talk! Let me potato. This pie crust recipe can be used, I don't know what I'm saying.